Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what honestly feels like a comic book origin story for modern media. We are tracing an incredible journey, moving from the sheer discovery of invisible forces floating around in the air, right up to the creation of a massive corporate empire that fundamentally changed how humanity communicates. Seriously, think about it for a second. How exactly did we go from just proving that invisible waves exist in the empty space around us to harnessing those very waves to build the world's most powerful, multi-billion-dollar broadcasting corporations? It's a wild story full of pure scientific genius, a few eccentric inventors, and some incredibly ruthless business visionaries.
Let's jump right into Section 1, Predicting the Invisible. This is where the science revolution begins.
And this scientific revolution, it moved incredibly fast. We're talking going from pure, theoretical math in 1864 to proven, undeniable fact in 1888 to a physical, working prototype by 1895. That is just about 30 years to completely change the trajectory of the world.
It all kicks off with a Scottish physicist named James Clerk Maxwell. In 1864, Maxwell did something absolutely mind-blowing. Using nothing but math, no crazy lab equipment, just mathematical equations, he united electricity and magnetism into a single invisible force. His math predicted that changes in these forces send waves spreading through space at literally 186,000 miles per second. He essentially mapped out an entire invisible world of electromagnetic frequencies long before anyone had ever actually seen or detected them.
You know, it's a huge deal when Albert Einstein is in awe. Einstein actually wrote about Maxwell's bold leap, saying, "To few men in the world has such an experience been vouchsafed." He was basically saying, imagine the feeling of proving, with just differential equations, that electromagnetic fields travel at the speed of light. It actually took other physicists decades to even wrap their heads around the full significance of what Maxwell had done.
But the actual physical proof? That didn't come until 1888, thanks to a German scientist named Heinrich Hertz. He took Maxwell's equations and dragged them into the physical world. He built this contraption that used an oscillating electric current to create a literal spark, and that spark generated actual electromagnetic energy that made a matching spark jump right across a gap in a receiving wire a few yards away. Zap. Just like that, Hertz proved the waves were completely real.
Which brings us to Section 2, Sparks and Telegraphs, kicking off the tech revolution.
Now, this new era was pushed forward by some seriously determined, eccentric folks who wanted to harness Hertz's sparks. Take Guglielmo Marconi. He built a system called wireless telegraphy, but, it had some distinct limitations. It used these incredibly cumbersome spark gap devices, which relied on discontinuous, interrupted bursts of energy. Because those waves were so jagged and broken, they were perfect for tapping out the dots and dashes of Morse code, but totally, absolutely impossible for sending something as complex as a human voice. So for Marconi, this was strictly a point-to-point business aimed squarely at shipping companies and navies.
But hey, Marconi was a total master of PR. In 1901, he grabbed the attention of the entire globe by flashing just 3 simple Morse pips, the letter S, all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, from England to Newfoundland. He proved once and for all that these invisible waves could actually bend around the curvature of the Earth, which changed global communication forever.
All right, moving right along to Section 3, the Continuous Wave Revolution.
Because let's be honest, humanity wanted way more than just beeps, right? We wanted to send actual voices. To do that, we had to ditch the sharp, jagged, discontinuous nature of Marconi's spark gap signals. The crucial technological leap here was moving to the smooth, sustained flow of continuous waves. This steady stream of energy was absolutely the vital key to unlocking broadcasting as we know it today.
Let's break down exactly what that means. A continuous wave is basically an electromagnetic wave that holds a constant amplitude and frequency. The real magic happens when you electrically vary or modulate that wave to carry the complexities of human speech or music. This is quite literally the foundation of amplitude modulation, which you probably know best as AM radio.
Generating those continuous waves, though, required entirely new hardware. In the early 1900s, a Canadian-American engineering professor named Reginald Fessenden teamed up with a General Electric engineer named Ernst Alexanderson. Together, they built this massive alternator that rotated at incredibly high speeds. Now, it was expensive, and it was ridiculously unwieldy, but it was a total game changer because it could finally sustain a consistent broadcast wave powerful enough to carry a voice.
And Fessenden put this massive machine to the test in the most legendary way. Picture this. It's Christmas Eve, 1906. He transmits a live program from Massachusetts. Astonished ship operators who are miles and miles out at sea suddenly hear something completely impossible coming through their earpieces. Not the usual dots and dashes, but the sound of a man reading poetry and playing the violin. The human voice was finally out there in the ether. Just incredible.
Now let's look at the business side of things. In Section 4, Building the Radio Empire.
To build an empire of this scale, you need a major shift from inventors to business visionaries. Following World War I, the U.S. government and private industry realized the insane strategic and commercial value of radio. So, in 1919, General Electric swoops in, buys up the assets of American Marconi, and consolidates all these crucial patents to form an absolute behemoth, the Radio Corporation of America, or RCA. A few years later, in 1926, RCA launches the National Broadcasting Company, NBC, to create a nationwide network of content.
But the real aha moment is why they built this empire. And that comes down to the vision of David Sarnoff, a former Marconi telegrapher who climbed to the very top of RCA. Way back in 1915, Sarnoff wrote this brilliant memo proposing the creation of a cheap, easily tuned receiver that would make radio a household utility. He wanted to beam news, concerts, and baseball games to hundreds of thousands of people simultaneously. In that exact moment, the entire business model flipped from point-to-point naval telegraphy to widespread household broadcasting. Sarnoff realized the real money wasn't in sending the messages, it was in selling the public the boxes to listen to them.
Which sets us up perfectly for Section 5, the Golden Age.
The financial success of this pivot was literally wild. By the summer of 1929, RCA's stock price had skyrocketed to a peak of $500 a share. To put that into perspective, it was sitting at just $85 in early 1928. It triggered a massive boom on Wall Street. Radio had suddenly become an indispensable part of daily life, and the financial markets completely exploded to reflect that growth.
And the adoption rate? Staggering. By the late 1930s, exactly as Sarnoff had predicted in that 1915 memo, radio truly was a household utility. Nearly 80% of United States households owned radio by 1939. You had millions of people tuning in at the exact same time to hear everything from comedy programs to the president's fireside chats. The medium completely and totally dominated the culture.
Which leaves us with this final thought. As one engineer in our sources pointed out, when Marconi transmitted his very first pulse, he believed the heavens were open to unlimited free communication. But the 20th century completely devoured that seemingly infinite sky, slicing it up into tiny slivers of spectrum sold off for billions of dollars. We've literally commodified the invisible waves that James Clerk Maxwell predicted. So, as we look to the 21st century and beyond, what vastness will we reclaim with the wireless technologies of tomorrow? It is definitely something to chew on the next time you connect to Wi-Fi or stream a song directly out of thin air. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it sparked your curiosity.